Hello, animators and artists. Wren Petkov is a recent graduate of Ireland's National Film School who's currently located in Dublin. They were also selected for Toon Boom Animation's 2025 Ambassador Program. We invited Wren to take us on a tour of their animatic chase scene, A Starter on the Loose, created as a project while participating in a mentorship program in 2023. Wren, welcome to the live stream.
Hey Mike, super cool to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Let's start with a quick introduction. Ren, could you introduce yourself with your name and what brought you from Ireland to Toronto back to Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Wren Petkov, and I recently graduated. I'm originally from Bulgaria. I moved to Ireland for college, and then I did the National Film School, and then I graduated. And just after graduating, I was hoping to move over, and then I got hired on a TV show that I'm not allowed to talk about too much. But yeah, so that kind of brought me back, and I've been here ever since, which was coming up on 6 months now.
Yeah, so I've got a lot to congratulate you about. So congratulations on graduating from the National Film School. Congratulations on your thesis film. Congratulations also on the
Too.
new job. What was your film school and mentorship experience like?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. I feel like I have a lot of hot takes, as I asked you earlier, but I feel like my biggest takeaway from it was maybe just how unprepared modern film schools are to get people ready for the job, but also just how fun of a space it is for for somebody to explore what they can make, the types of films they're curious to make, the type of stories they want to tell. So yeah, my experience was very mixed in those ways. I feel like everything I learned about filmmaking was probably mostly from like mentorships and courses that I took on like online and outside of school. And then school was really good for meeting awesome friends and expanding my network and sort of figuring out what I wanted to do with myself in the first place. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, animation school is kind of an interesting place because you are at the same point in your like life as basically everybody around you. You all have the same schedule. You all have the same interests. It's really easy to make friends. What were some things that you found were a bit of a jump or an adjustment, like when going from school and mentorships to jumping into a studio?
The thing I was least prepared for was the sort of the mix of people that you're going to be working with, as in the mixed experience levels and sort of the past backgrounds. And everybody is coming in with all these preconceptions, as you said, right? In art school, we're all sort of in it together and we're all at the exact same level. But in a studio, everybody's worked on different productions, everybody's worked on different kinds of shows. And so I feel like that's really interesting because you say, right, you might be talking about the same thing or thinking that you're talking about the same thing with somebody, but in your heads it's like a completely different image or it's a completely different subject even. So yeah, the other thing I was maybe like really kind of unprepared for was just how um, I feel like, especially nowadays, based on what I've heard, little training there is on the job. I think I think a lot of us come out of art school thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna be um, my they're going to hold my hand, they're going to talk me through everything. But my experience at least has been much more sort of, you're put into the deep water and just figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, then that's kind of too bad. But yeah, at the same time, it's really interesting. Like that kind of environment, I feel like is so, like I've learned so much in the past 6 months of working, and that just feels nice to be improving and like, yeah, just getting to study from everybody at a studio. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why we wanted to invite you to this live stream was to discuss some of your recent projects, including the scene animatic from A Starter on the Loose. Well, let's first talk about that one. What was your goal with this project?
I had recently been to Paris when I started my mentorship with Rajam Kalawan, who's a Netflix feature story artist, and I had been super inspired by. I mean, obviously the architecture. I have some family there as well, so I feel like Paris always feels very homely to me. Um, and while I was there and I was cafe sketching, I got a call from my roommate that my sourdough starter had exploded in the fridge after
Oh
I
no.
obviously hadn't fed it for a little bit. And so I thought, this feels like a really nice combination of things. I wonder what I can do with this as a sequence. And so during the mentorship, I kind of was uh, given the prompt of, okay, how can we emotionally involve the audience as quickly as possible into an action piece, right? This is something Raj always says is you can't, right, like you can deliver so many punches and you can make the best action scene, but if the audience doesn't care about the characters or doesn't care about the drama, then you're probably not going to have um, a great piece in the end. So that was the two things I really wanted to try with it. And so I wanted to guide the audience through like a scene that's probably like not as faithful to Paris as it could have been, but I think in the end I prioritized the audience experience. How can I escalate the scene? How can I guide the action and build the geography of the city to fit the what's happening on screen at every given moment? So yeah, I kind of went through a very iterative process where I was first working off a real map of Paris, and then I drew my own map and figured out at like a sort of a different geography, sort of like my own alternate Paris that I could set the like varying elevations of, because Paris is a pretty flat city for the most part, and I really knew that I wanted to explore a bit of verticality, as you're going to see in the excerpt that I'm going to show you guys in a bit. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was.
I think escalation is a really good word too, because you have this pursuit that goes from a foot chase to weaving through the streets on a scooter, and then the starter gets like larger and larger as it progresses. There's like a lot of different forms of escalation that I really want to ask you about. I was also curious too. I kind of felt that maybe 5 years ago, there was a spike in audience members who could relate to feeding a sourdough starter. What was your relationship like with baking prior to this project? Like, were you an experienced baker, or was it something that you were just sort of like dipping your toes into?
Yeah, during COVID, I think we all went a little crazy. I'm allowed to say COVID, right?
Yeah,
Okay. I'm just gonna assume.
we acknowledge it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. No. I think we all got into different weird things, and I like yeah, baking and like sourdough was my weird thing that I got into, and then subsequently, forgetting the sourdough starter was sort of the end of that whole saga. And I actually had a friend that I had a really big fight with over this, because they had given me their 23-year-old starter, which at the time was older than me. Um, and yeah, that was the one that I killed. So
Oh
not a
no.
great end, but it was that we had some fun times along the way.
All right, let's get into it. Can you take us on a tour of the sequence from the animatic, and maybe we can talk about the parts that you're most proud of.
Yeah, I'm just gonna show like a little excerpt, if that's okay, from towards the middle. So this is just after we've introduced the the characters and the drama of it all. And it's just to kind of catch you guys up. This is about Micah, who is a the son of a famous baker in Paris, and this is on the day of the big bread festival, which does not happen in real life Paris. You'll be sad to find out, but in my alternate Paris, every year there's a huge bread baking festival where all the bakers from throughout France gather to celebrate baking. And so Micah accidentally sets this starter on the loose through the streets of Paris. And for anyone who hasn't owned a sourdough, you need to feed them. And as they get fed, they get bigger, and then you take a part of it, and that's what you bake. But in this case, the starter just decides that it wants to grow as much as it can. So, yeah, this is the like excerpt that we're gonna run through. So this is just after it's escaped through the window. Um, it is gonna break the glass. Get back here! Dad's gonna kill me. Run through this cafe. Sorry. Croissants for sale. Croissants for sale. Get them while they're hot. Pan over. Huh. Oh no! Watch out! Huh? Sourdough jumps. Are you okay? And it runs over. Can I borrow your scooter? Get back here! Driving. Hey, not fair! Beep beep! Hey! Huh? Ah! And that's the end of the excerpt. He's gonna go on to hopefully save the day in the rest of the sequence, but yeah, this is the verticality I was talking about earlier, where this part of Paris does exist, but it's sort of pushed a little bit. This would be in sort of the Montmartre district, which is in the north side of town, and I've sort of rearranged a couple pieces. But yeah, this was
Yeah, I love that it ends with, at least this segment ends with a look at like a wider view of Paris, because before you just sort of saw an apartment and then like a neighborhood block, and it escalates from being on foot to on like a moped. So there are all of these different areas of escalation, and you sort of escalate to, okay, this is going into like a wider area of the city. Can you talk about like how you thought about some of these techniques and of upping the stakes, of upping the ante, of like showing the scope is getting bigger as things are getting bigger?
yeah, absolutely. I was super inspired at the time by George Saunders's book on writing, "A Swim in a Pond in the Rain," in which he talks about um, this idea of each scene needs to escalate, and even if you're having a repeating motif in this case, right, that's him chasing the sourdough, it's gonna need to be different through each section. And that's actually why I fictionalized my Paris, was so that we're not just running through buildings, or we're running right like through the streets, we're running through distinct sort of areas of the city. And so uh, yeah, we start out on just the streets, then we go through the market, and then we go through the staircase, and that's going to lead us in through the entrance up in front of the Eiffel Tower. So I really was trying to, keep things interesting and sort of raise the stakes at each moment. And that was actually maybe one of the things that I'm unhappy about with the sequence, and that I have tried to do in my uh, later work after this, was I felt that each location wasn't specific enough, and I really was hoping that I could do even more specificity through my future sequences, which I have because I did this a little while ago.
Yeah, you did mention though before that like this was a project that got you into a studio, which is really cool, right? To be able to like take a mentorship course, get feedback, and then have that turn into something that gets you a job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually wrote a whole essay about this on my blog, but yeah, like it was a really interesting experience getting that, and like specifically getting feedback from different studios that I pitched this to, or that I sent this into, and each studio sort of aligning with it differently, or I got certain feedback from certain studios, and then others from other studios. But yeah, in the end, the job that I did end up getting was, they specifically mentioned in the interview that they really loved this sequence, and um, they thought all the points that we have so far talked about, they liked. So I think, and that's why I specifically like mentorships and courses, because I think film schools, um, for the most part, don't really have a current pulse. We were just chatting before we hopped on mic about, right, like the how the most common advice used to be don't draw anime, but now anime is what gets you hired. And so I think film schools can be a little bit out of touch. And so getting feedback on your work or getting guided through stuff with an actual someone who's working in the industry, right, the current professional, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, Ren, you mentioned that you'd worked on a new animatic spring dance. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the background that led to the development of this project?
Yeah, totally. I can show some of the stuff to you guys, but this is, I don't think I've posted about this just yet. I've been taking a course with Stephanie Stein, who directed Kung Fu Panda 4. And this has been my sequence that I've been working on through her mentorship. And it's been really, really interesting. And it's the craziest course I've ever taken, just because of her experience level and like kind of the knowledge she has of how to structure a story, and obviously all her like crazy stories of working in different studios and working with different artists. So yeah, I wanted to make a sequence that, as I said, right, like was a little bit more specific and had these more distinct like origins. And so I told a story about my culture and like my home country, which is Bulgaria. And Bulgaria has this like really specific tradition of the kukri dancers, which are these masked. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Um, they're these masked bell carrying warriors who protect the people from evil spirits. And I wanted to see if I could tell the story from the perspective of one of those evil spirits and see, are they really evil or are they just trying to exist? And so it's about this girl, and she goes on a date with this guy who is unsuspecting that she is a spirit. And so I actually am finishing it today and tomorrow, and I'm pitching it on Saturday to a room of a bunch of different directors from across the field. So that's going to be super super excited, and I'm super stoked to share more of this. And if you want, Mike, I could actually show you guys some of the stuff inside my storyboard profile, if
That'd be
that would
really
be
cool.
interesting. Okay, cool, absolutely. Yeah. So I think Storyboard Pro has like a very like TV rep, but I actually think, and I know of a lot of people who do use it in feature, and so um, yeah, I've been working in it for forever, and I think it's been getting more and more feature oriented features, and I would love for that to continue because I think it can definitely be super useful, and it's a big step up from using Photoshop. Um, but okay, I can do like a really small pitch of a tiny section of this if you want, and then I can
I would
talk
love that.
about. Cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, this is just after the character introduction, and as you can see down on my timeline, some of this isn't going to be fully clean, but um, yeah, it is still a work in progress. But
That's
so
part of the
this
beauty
sort
of
of
boards too, is that like they don't need to be clean necessarily.
goes. Well, I think it depends on what studio you're working for, but yeah, sometimes they don't. Um, so yeah, so she goes, "Oh yeah, I feel sorry for any spirits around today. We should head in before we miss the dance." We pan up. Rawr! These kids run by. Ha ha ha. Bells are ringing. We pan up. We arrive. People are dancing. Music is playing. Whoa! Huh. She blushes. Hey, what gives? She notices her scales are showing. Not now, not now. She shakes. Diana? I just, really want to dance. She adjusts her headscarf. Come on. She pulls him along. We approach the dance. Um, and yeah, this is as much as I'm willing to show. But um, yeah, I would be super happy to chat about any part of this, or like how I guess adapt Storyboard Pro to like my feature pipeline, if that's, and if you think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be really interesting. I think one of the things that kind of divides like a TV production pipeline from a feature pipeline is that you tend to see a lot more like light and shadow in a like a feature storyboard. Would you say that's like true to your experience?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think that's something that I'm like definitely like have been thinking about and like trying to do more with the sequences. Yeah, especially if you look at someone like Ian Abando's stuff, who I think he also works in Storyboard Pro. It tends to be so full of right like the old master stuff like Kurosawa. Like it all looks very cinematic. Um, yeah, so I think that's like definitely like one of my experiences. I've also found that with feature, you're much more encouraged to use blurs and right like use depth in your shots, sort of create these like
Mm.
multi-plane compositions because you're allowed to move the camera in 3D more and you have that freedom. So that was like that's been one of my big experiences with it. Um, which I think is pretty universal. But yeah, I also think the other big thing is the bigger focus on uh, like a more these more elaborate shots, or being free to do something like uh, for example, in a I feel like in a TV production. Uh, this like I don't know if I would necessarily be allowed to do a shot like this, where in feature I can be
With like
comfortable in
dozens of
going,
incidental characters all kind of dancing together.
yeah, something that I can just throw in. I feel like that would be pretty difficult, but here I have the freedom for it, and yeah, I think I know that a lot of people have reservations about using Storyboard Pro for this kind of thing, but I feel like um, if with enough adaptation you can push it through. And the way I have things set up actually is sometimes I get asked this. I usually just have the frame actually just in shot. So I'm working with a 1080 file, and then I have the frame on top, and then I have this like little text file. This is something that I learned from Stephanie Stein. Actually, this is how she does her boards. Well, whenever she was still boarding, but yeah, so I just have a little text layer up there that I can type stuff into if I need to, and I can just turn that off on scenes that don't need it. Um, yeah, and I like love
That's
that I can
interesting.
color code all my panels, and so I usually just do green for clean, um, yellow for stuff that needs a bit more work, and then red for stuff that's fully rough. So this here would actually be a thumbnail. Like I would really want to push his expression a little bit and clean him up a little bit more.
As someone who plays a lot of D&D, I've noticed that like our relationship with monsters has changed considerably over a few decades, right? Where like monsters, I think, used to sort of be like an external embodiment of anxieties, like things like greed or isolation being put into like a creature. Whereas like more recently, I think there's more of an identification with monsters. Like, what if like this thing that is feared by other people? What if there's more to it than people see?
Yeah,
What was your sort
yeah.
of idea of like focusing on a spirit that traditionally would not be seen as a protagonist?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I've actually been super fascinated by how much D&D has risen to prominence, and I think it's sort of right, playing like this huge role in our society now that I don't think enough people realize. I personally haven't played a lot of D&D in my life, but I did want to make the sequence specifically about a monster or about someone who would be perceived by a monster because of the current sort of I feel like I mean that it, the themes of right like marginalization and sort of you know pushing people out and saying who's a monster and who's not. I feel like that's always been really important to like us as people, but I feel like especially nowadays this is something that is very relevant or has felt relevant in recent years. And so I really wanted to tell the story of somebody who right like wasn't approved of by society, but maybe just wants to exist and live in peace. So yeah, that was my original inspiration. And there was different versions of this where I experimented with her being um, more monstrous looking, but I kind of settled on this design because I still wanted us to be able to relate to her and right like read her expressions and understand how she's feeling. And while there's definitely like ways to make it clear how like a someone less humanoid is feeling, I thought that wasn't really the challenge that I wanted to face with this particular board.
Yeah, I just also want to say too, the compositions look awesome. I know in the PDF you shared a shot where they're all dancing, and I think they're backlit, and it looks like beautiful with like
Thank
very
you so
clear
much.
silhouettes.
Yeah, thank you. That was something that I definitely wanted to push myself because I felt that the start on the loose sequence was like that was maybe the main thing that I thought was lacking was um, the sort of more I guess cinematic look, or it wasn't as cinematic as I wanted it to be. So that was definitely something that I wanted to push into more. And yeah, I've been learning a lot more about right like how to compose shots. I've been trying to do daily film studies for the past while, which has been super fun and like just primarily actually looking at like live action films and a lot of like black and white and sort of classic cinema and seeing how do they arrange their shots. And especially I love the Kurosawa crowds. I feel like he's like
Yes.
he's the master of that. And I've been trying to incorporate as much of that as I can into this sequence because I think right, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what animation can do in a lot of ways. And I think looking at live action is a really great sort of inspiration for that because live action has been around for well, they've both been around for equal amounts of time, but I feel like live action has had a lot more money and prevalence and like a lot more directors that have worked in it. Where animation for the longest time was just mostly jokes and like, right, what goofy stuff can we get into? But I feel like now that we want to be get taken seriously more and like tell these stories that are more mature and right, it's not just for kids anymore. I don't think it ever was just for kids, but right, like it's not perceived as
No.
just for kids. Um, so I think, yeah, that's allowing us to tell these more interesting stories, and I'm really curious where we're headed as a medium.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point too. And I think when you're a storyboard artist too, like working at a studio, the challenges are like you have to think about like, well, this is not going to work in a production, at least not a production at the scale and with the budget that I'm working on. Because there are things that are difficult to do in 2D animation. I have a crowd scene that can become very difficult if all those characters need to be designed and animated, and if they're all on screen at the same time and all moving. You might be asked, well, is there a way we can cheat this a little bit? Can we make this like a matte painting as opposed to all of these
Yeah.
being animated? Um, but then if you also want to like do things that like push the envelope a little bit more and are really ambitious and say like, hey, this is a flex. I know this is going to be more effort, but I think it will look good. I think those are kind of an interesting push and pull. How do you feel about that balance in like between wanting to be kind the rest of the production pipeline and wanting to do things that are very ambitious?
Um, yeah, I actually really ran into that with my thesis film, which I had always been like a huge proponent of. Things shouldn't be storyboarded with animation in mind. Things should just be storyboarded and then figured out how to animate later. And I really, yeah, kind of I didn't really set myself up very well with my boards, where I kind of really was boarding with, okay, what's the craziest thing I can do, and then running into it, I ended up with a film that has mostly crowd shots, um, a lot of action, and then having to figure out, okay, how am I going to actually animate this? And I did actually end up. It was funny that you brought up like crowds and mats. I actually ended up animating a good few crowd shots and then scrapping all that animation because I found that actually the main character got lost and it was sort of less readable if the crowd was moving. So I did replace them with mats in the end. So that was a really interesting experience I had, and it maybe sort of converted me a little bit more to the 3D animation camp in some ways. Not that I have much experience with 3D, but I like the appeal of you can do anything with the camera. You can do as many characters on screen, and you don't have to be worried about, yeah, is this going to be a matte or are these all going to be individually moving? So I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting. I actually, I don't think I prepared showing my phone, but I can flash it on screen if that would be interesting.
I think that would be interesting. I mean, one thing I also would want to say too is I really respect the like learning through stubbornness. Like, oh, I'm going to do it this way, and then like, oh no, that actually is very difficult. I think that's kind of a cool way to learn stuff.
Yeah, I cool would be one way of putting it. Yeah, I've always been very strong-headed, and I've always wanted to do things my own way, probably to my detriment in some ways. Um, but yeah, I really wanted to make sure, especially with art school, I was very resistant to doing things a certain way, and I think that maybe was both um, beneficial in some ways, and then in others, it did kick me in the butt, right?
Yeah.
This is the film, by the way. I'm just gonna throw it up on screen. Yeah, shots like this weren't too bad, but there was ones more um, like this one that did start out with like a lot of character movement, and then just discovering that, oh, this is not. There's a reason why people don't typically do shots like this in an animated production or in a 2D student film.
Yeah,
Um,
and I also think too, like it's interesting that like different types of media have different built-in sort of advantages or strengths and weaknesses. You know, like with live action film, there's some things you absolutely get for free. You have a camera, you can move it around, but then you also are kind of burdened by the constraints of where you're actually able to put a camera. Like, oh, it'd be great if I could get this shot with this lens, except that there's a wall here and I can't bring the camera any further back, you know. In 2D animation, there are all of these things about like, okay, well, if I move the camera in this way, I'd have to animate the background moving, and that would be tricky for every frame. Then you could use 3D for that, but then if you have your 2D characters moving at a different frame rate from the 3D background, that can make things look jittery. I kind of love how people approach all those different trade-offs and like how they think about, hey, here's how I can solve this problem. Because I think that's kind of like the the whole thing, right? Like it's how do I make all these different pieces work together into a production?
yeah, yeah, totally. And like that's been maybe one of the really interesting things about working on a 2D production, which I feel like isn't as common nowadays, with a lot of production switching to 3D. Is yeah, seeing how are we solving these issues, and especially my production is in house, and I think that's also a big rarity nowadays. So just actually getting to chat with the animators and right, first see nice storyboard or getting the animator to come up and be like, oh, how, what did you mean by this movement here, or what is this thing supposed to be? I think that's that's been like a really interesting experience, and definitely like working on my own thesis. And like, by the way, I co-directed this, I should say, with Michelle Sao, who did the backgrounds, and I animated it. I couldn't have done 50. I think it's like 54 backgrounds and 5 minutes of animation. I could not have done
Wow.
both in the 3 to 6 months that you're allotted for this. Um, but yeah, so like having had this experience, I think was really definitely very interesting, and I think that's why I am a right, like despite thinking the film school is inadequate in so many ways at getting you into the industry or preparing you for the industry. Even I think the fact that you do get so much free time and right, like the environment where everybody is making their own films, I think that's awesome, and I think it's so cool that so many people come out as filmmakers rather than just coming out as little um, factory workers that are just ready to do this one thing forever. Uh, I think that's really really cool, and I'm really happy that those are spaces that exist, and I hope they continue to exist and maybe can adapt and evolve with the times. I don't know if this answers the
Oh,
original question. I'm so sorry.
no, that's a good answer. And Ren, we actually got a question from the audience. Julie Roulette, who was on last week's live stream, is asking, um, first they can see that like you're very passionate about the scene that you shared with us, and they're wondering, what would be your dream project if you could work on anything?
Oh, my dream project. I think this answer has my answer to that question has really changed recently because I think times have been moving very quickly. But my dream project would probably be my own flow. One day I would love to, like, especially now with indie animation being a bigger and bigger thing, I would really love to direct my own feature and, work with a really passionate group of artists on, a whole pipeline and, be constrained by budget, sure, but then have creative solutions to that and not have the overhead of what are we allowed to do and what are we not allowed to do, right? Because I feel like flow would not necessarily exist if they had to do things a certain way, right? Like if they had to have dialogue or if they had to have human characters, um, or if they were fighting for like a specific runtime or that kind of thing. So I think that would be my dream project. But in the meantime, and I feel like that's um, I do know that Gintz started very early, but in the meantime, I would love to keep working on productions and, try out more TV, try out more feature, just work across different studios and learn from as many people as I can and meet as many passionate people as I can that I can expand my own sensibilities because I think maybe the biggest thing that I've learned, especially like making like a film, was just like my own limitations and realizing this is what I can do, and it's only so much. But if I get to learn from people and I get to keep developing myself, I can then one day be ready to um, do feature by myself or like direct a project like that. And I think that it's becoming clear. Like I always wondered why there are not really like that many young directors, um, or at least sort of famous ones, and not so much in animation specifically. I should add as little asterisks. But I feel like the other big thing that I've been learning is just how much experience you need to make a good original story. There was this uh, video that I watched recently by this Cal Arts graduate that talked about how all the Cal Arts films generally fall into like these like three buckets of films, right? Like which are either about going to college, about leaving high school, or about graduating college. And it's because right, everybody who goes there has had the exact same experience, and they're all the same age. Whereas you get older, when you get Miyazaki, who's like whatever, right, like 87, I think, 85. Um, he's had so much experience, and I think so many different stories that are stored within you. And so that's something that I definitely want to keep getting. I want to keep traveling. I want to keep learning more. I want to keep expanding myself. And I did make a film about going to college, but I hope that it has a unique perspective in that, right? It's about a city, and I put in as much of my immigrant experience as I could into it. And so, um, yeah, I'm so sorry. This is a very roundabout answer, and I did forget the original
No, I
question, but I
mean,
hope. Oh, that
I
made
think
sense.
that's kind of inherent. Like, there's a reason why so many animated productions are about the craft of animation. So many like films are about the craft of filmmaking or about filmmakers. So many books are about authors. Um, it is unavoidable in some ways, not necessarily unavoidable, but it makes sense why it shows up. Can you tell us a little bit
Maybe
about
for
your
that reason,
experience
I'm happy that
participating in a
Miyazaki hasn't. Yeah, I'm happy that Miyazaki hasn't made a filmmaking film. That all his films are very like he kind of stays away from the
ooh,
more meta narratives.
I kind of
Um,
thought The Boy and the Heron was a little bit, in sort of the, like, film about filmmaker, like someone holding up a world based on imagination, trying to, like, pass it on to the next generation, or maybe,
yeah,
it
no,
depends
I
if this is
agree.
actually the last Miyazaki film or not.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But I feel like I'm happy that that kind of thing came very, very late in his career, and like he got to sort of have something to say. Because like I feel like a lot of films about filmmakers don't necessarily have too much to say, but that one, I rated it. I like. It's not even to me. It didn't feel necessarily about like the craft itself, it felt more about the responsibility that came with having built his own world and having, influenced so many people. So I think like even that was like a really unique perspective that he brought to it.
Yeah. One of the things too you mentioned, I guess this kind of ties in with that, is like what was your experience participating in a mentorship program and how do you feel it affected your practice as an artist?
Um, it was, yeah, like I mean, like finishing this current course I'm doing with Stephanie was kind of insane, and like it was maybe the best experience of my life. Just working in a really, really tight knit group of people. We're a very small class. I think there's like 10 of us total, and it was a very selective course where Stephanie picked exactly who got to work, and I think she was striving for like diversity within us. So everybody has a different experience level and comes from a different culture and has a different background, and so yeah, just getting to develop my story and like this story wouldn't be what it is at all if it wasn't for all my course mates. And yeah, like a lot of them I had looked up to before the course. A lot of them I met and we're now really good friends. And so I think it's really cool. It has almost a college feel, except maybe um, a little bit smaller and a little bit more intimate, and almost like a little film workshop where each week you meet 2 or 3 times with everybody, and like you get to pitch, okay, here's what I want to do, here's what I want to change. And so I found that really interesting, and like it's super inspiring. This is something my friend Christo said to me, who he had taken this course before, and he said, because we're the whole course, the way that worked was um, you make 2 sequences through the duration of it. This was my second sequence that I made. I don't have any images of the first one, I don't think, but we were asked to plan our both sequences like even before the course started, and Christo didn't. Christo just prepped his first one. And I asked him like, "Oh, why?" Like, and he said, "Because I'm expecting to be so inspired by everybody that by the time it comes time to make my second sequence, I'll have a completely new idea and I'll have a completely new paradigm of what even a good story is." And I really found that to be the case, and I could not have come up with this story before before like its time came. And yeah, just everybody working on. I mean, somebody made a story about depression that was like, 1,000 panels, and it was like completely harrowing. Somebody made a story about a spelling bee, and that was really cool, and it sort of had a lot of B movie cameos. Somebody made like this like mother daughter story. So there was like so many different genres. Someone made like a race, which was super cool, like very Mad Maxy, and like just getting all these sources of inspiration in one room is so cool and like so like so incredible, and I'm so grateful to have gotten the opportunity. And I also think that it's crazy that this is something people can get for, while it's a lot of money in the I think in the compared to art school, or especially 4 years of art school, it's very, very cheap. So I was maybe shaped in those ways. I think the biggest thing that I learned in terms of my own craft was I don't even know where to start. There's a lot of them, but I think like prioritizing acting and prioritizing a character's truth. This is an exercise Stephanie always used to tell us to do, which is good friend, bad friend, which is as you're writing like a dialogue scene, or as you're writing anything about your character, you want to imagine first being their good friend and saying, "Oh, let's." I'm going to give an example about this scene. Let's say she's dancing with him, and so you can imagine being the two little, angel and devil on her shoulder, and one of them is like, "Oh, look how cool he is! Isn't he so nice that he's taking us on this date and this dance? This is so nice. We should be so grateful." And then the little devil can be like, "Oh, right, like it could be anxiety. It could be right. She's maybe envious. She's looking at like everybody around her, and she's like, oh, like they're so much prettier, or like they're dancing so much better than me." And so if you have these two perspectives, it gives you, and then you can write the line. and it gives you like so much more nuance and a better understanding of who your character is, and it changes the acting completely. Like this shot here, which I can probably actually, I wasn't gonna show, but I could probably, if I get far enough into this, um, was actually my friend. I mean, a bunch of my friends helped me put this together, but I think um, so. They touch their hands. She's a little hesitant at first, and then this jolt goes through her body, and then she smiles, and then he smiles back. But I would not have been able to even like come up with this if I wasn't thinking about how each of the characters is feeling, what's their headspace, and yeah, I've learned so much from that, and I want to do like even more of that in the future. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface with it, with this sequence.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting too, because you see like what the character wants and also what's holding the character back. And I think that's where you have like tension and drama.
Yeah, yeah. No, totally, and like just I think not enough people. This might be a hot take. I think not enough people want to write, and I think not enough people want to engage with this deep character stuff because we're so often told as advice that it's not going to get you a job, right? We just want pretty boards. And while I think that's definitely true, I think showing that you understand story problems and story structure and arcs and all that, I think is actually just as valuable because while a pretty board might get you past the first round of a recruiter, once it gets to the head of story and they're deciding who do they want on their team, they're probably going to want somebody who clearly understands how to solve story because right, I mean we all know that a lot of the time the scripts we're given are pretty flawed and somebody's going to need to fix it, and it's usually going to be, well, if you want to keep the job it's usually going to have to be you, or
And then they break out
at
into
least that's been my
dance.
experience. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Looking back, do you have advice for storyboard artists who are interesting in boarding chase scenes? Like if you're going back and giving advice to Baby Wren, what would you tell them?
um yeah, I think I mean everything we've just said is stuff that would have been mind-blowing to me 6 months ago even, and I totally like would start there. Right, how do you create depth in a character, how do you bring out the best of them, and how can you incorporate that into a chase scene, and especially if it's right like a lot of action, how are you going to make sure that the audience cares about the characters, how are you going to make sure that they know how the character is feeling. So we're going to need to be right. Like that's why in Mission Impossible, it's not just punch punch, it's punch punch and then reaction shot because we need to know how the character is feeling about it. I think that was like one of the biggest things I learned. I would probably also say spend a bit of time developing the character designs and figuring out what is the best contrast that you can have. Like for example, if I was to redo this scene, I would love to emphasize more um, the specific designs. So, for example, I think that my sourdough, I don't think, I mean, it gets bigger towards the very end of the sequence. Like the sequence ends with it being like larger than the whole city. I would have loved to make it a little bit like bigger throughout the scene, just so there's more contrast. So if it was like the size of a truck um, next to Micah or something, I think that would have been really fun, and like that would have actually had some really fun gags, right? Like, what if it eats like a person and then it has to spit them out, or like it, there's a lot of gag potential. So I think just sort of thinking a little bit more ahead would have been more helpful. And then I think to other people, I would love to give the advice. I mean, this is something that I like very much like learned doing this was like, just using as much reference as you can, and like especially making a story that's as personal to you and you know the location and you know where it is. Like this, my first sequence that I did that again I don't have for Stephanie's mentorship that I don't have here was set in just like outside my house. I mean, it was set in kind of my area. I live by the seaside, and I live in this like little seaside town, and so I wanted to set like a piece on the docks and sort of characters moving around. So like a lot of the backgrounds and locations were based off of actual photos that I took, and I think that makes things so specific and so interesting. And I think that's something that we need more of. Like Miyazaki has this 3 meter rule where he doesn't ever use as inspiration anything that's or like further than 3 meters, which I don't think is meant to be taken literally. But he talks about it a lot in some of the documentaries, and he really, really tries not to look at the internet. He doesn't look at art books. He doesn't look at other people's well, films probably, but not so much storyboard sequences, especially because he's trying to make things as personal to him as possible and as specific as possible. And right, you see a lot of that in Ponyo or in any of his films, right? Like Ponyo is actually set just outside that the summer house that he used to go to, and you can see it in the documentary. Like all the locations he drove past, he like they actually are real places, and that's why they feel so specific, and that's why they feel so unique. And I think that's why people get like so drawn into them. And like yeah, like my favorite artists, like the people I admire most are the ones that do that kind of thing. One of my classmates actually, Adele, he his name is Adele Sabi. He's on all the social medias. You guys can find him, or probably already follow him. But his sequence is set in Paris, and it's like a version of Paris that I've never seen because he actually grew up there, and so it's these really, really like almost like noir scenes that I never could have come up with, right? Like in my sequence of Paris, right? Like my sequence of Paris is very lighthearted and almost very touristy because even though I have family there, I am still a tourist at the end of the day. Um, and it's so that's why it reflects that. But we have these different understandings, and I think that's so cool because if we both had the exact same Paris in our sequences, it probably wouldn't be very interesting. And so I think I would love to see um, more people using their own background and the environment as references. I have another friend who lives in Brazil, and she uses these like crazy like sort of environments. Like she lives in Rio, which is so crazy because like the
Oh
only
wow.
movie set in Rio I can think of is actual right, like Rio, with the parrots. And that was a good movie, but it's the only one I can think of. And like I don't know, I can only imagine how cool it is to step outside to your house and like just look at the huge Jesus statue, and like the sort of story ideas that you would get from that. So yeah, and this is something that like obviously I want to do in my own work as well. Yeah, like it's just travel more and see more places and get to experience more different types of people. Because this is feedback that I got even for this sequence actually. Is and like I mean, even though this isn't done, I'm already thinking of how it can be better. Um, but I always get this feedback that like my characters all sort of act like me, and maybe that's because I haven't played enough D&D, but it's really hard for me to like act not like myself. And so I think like I want to meet more different people that are completely different, right? Like my opposite, and then see how they act and study and like right like draw them and or even just like right like exist with them and get to understand them. And I think that would expand the sorts of characters I can portray accurately. Um, I'm so sorry. What was the
So
original question?
I feel like my takeaway from this is that we should all live in like charming seaside towns, and I'm here for that. I think that's very good advice, honestly. No, but
Yeah.
I really like the idea too of like the curiosity that you need to have for the world around you. The idea of like looking for like good friend, bad friend. Because I notice like in like fandom communities, people who like consume media will say like, "Well, how come this character makes these mistakes?" And like the mistakes are the story, you know, like you don't have the character, you don't have the story without like insecurities and flaws and like things that lead people a little bit astray because otherwise you have someone who just makes perfect choices the whole time and that's not a story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. And like, I think if we haven't made any mistakes ourselves, then we probably wouldn't have very interesting ones to talk about. Um, right. My film is about getting lost in a city and like on the way to college. And while that's, you know, not the least unique experience, it's also not um, I feel like even in the comments there were so many people that were like, "Oh, this exact thing happened to me," and I was like, first of all, I'm happy that people can relate, but also, um, I want to find these experiences that nobody else has had, and then if I can
Hmm.
like capture those on film, I think that's. I don't know if you watched Mike or anybody in the chat, Sinners, which just came out, but that was like so crazy
I've
cool
heard
and like
really good things about it.
yeah, it was insane and like um, you know a western vampire movie like that's crazy. I would never have thought of that and like so I think yeah, just having more of these different experiences would be super interesting in making your own mistakes. And I've definitely like made a lot of mistakes myself, but I want uh, less of them to be maybe about storyboarding. Because I can sit here and list so many storyboarding mistakes, but I can, maybe would love to make more life mistakes, right? Less buying the wrong car, but maybe, right, getting in with the wrong group of people and, you know, uh, having to, run away from the cops or something cool like that. I don't know. Obviously, don't no one do anything illegal, and
Or
definitely
maybe
don't have
do.
that
Who
many
knows? I'm not your
takeaway. But
boss.
yeah,
Um, Ren, it would be a mistake if, because we're running out of time, if I didn't ask you can we find more of your work on the web?
oh yeah, totally. I am unprepared for this question, but I am on Instagram. Let me just open that up super quickly. I am on Instagram. I have a blog that I always forget to direct people to. Um, yeah, this is my Instagram. I have been sort of in a big hole recently of just working on these sequences in secret. That's why none of them are on my profile, but they'll be going up very, very soon. I Let me just also share my blog with you. It's story notes on Substack, and I sort of write about all my experiences, and I have a lot of stuff about Miyazaki, and um,
Anyo.
this is my make art and portfolio pieces essay that kind of was a very hot takey essay that a lot of people on LinkedIn did not agree with, and it got me into some trouble. But it's always fun to get into
There's no point in having a
discussions.
hot take if everybody agrees with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah. Please read my blog. Please check out my Instagram. Check out my movie. I'm very proud of it. Um, and yeah, this is. I think that's everything I would have to like. I would be. I mean, I exist on all sorts of places on the internet, but I think these are the main ones. Thank you so much for having me. It was super cool to chat, Mike.
Yeah, Ren, this was a
And like,
delight.
thank you
Thank
everyone
you
for
so much for
coming.
taking time to discuss your work on A Starter on the Loose. I also want to thank our live audience for joining the discussion. If you are an animation student and are currently thinking about your thesis film, one of the best kept secrets at Toon Boom Animation is that we provide affordable student licenses for Storyboard Pro and Harmony at toonboom.com/students. I highly recommend checking that out. And if you want more storyboards in your life, be sure to check out Mike Morris's collaboratory art stream on Wednesday, May 28th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Collaboratory is a 90-minute show where Mike Morris improvises a storyboard in Storyboard Pro based on prompts from the audience. And if you enjoyed this conversation, you won't want to miss this. So thank you all for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.